In Alaska's icy wilderness, history may have just shifted. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin sat face to face, emerging with a chilling demand. Ukraine must withdraw from Donetsk and Luhansk, or the war will rage on. Now, the world asks, will peace come through concession or collapse? Russian President Vladimir Putin pressed US President Donald Trump to secure Ukrainian withdrawal from the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions as a condition for ending the war. According to multiple accounts cited by the Financial Times, Putin told Trump during their Alaska summit that if his core demands were met, Russia would freeze the rest of the front line and halt new offensives. Trump carried this proposal into his conversations with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders the following day, the report added. He urged them to move away from efforts to secure a temporary ceasefire first and instead push directly for a comprehensive peace agreement. Under the outline sketched by Moscow, Russia would gain full control over Donetsk and Luhansk, territory it already partially occupies and where its forces are currently advancing, while freezing lines in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. For Kyiv, the prospect is unacceptable. Zelensky has repeatedly warned against surrendering territory, describing eastern fortress cities like Sloviansk and Kramatorsk as vital to Ukraine's defense. Meanwhile, the Kremlin continues to demand Ukraine's demilitarization, restrictions on its political orientation, and a block on NATO accession, conditions Kyiv regards as incompatible with sovereignty. In fact, the Russian stance has hardened since April, when intermediaries were told Moscow might freeze the entire front line if their so-called core issues were resolved. In Alaska, Putin went further, explicitly demanding Ukrainian withdrawal from Donetsk and Luhansk as the price for halting elsewhere. Trump, who before the meeting had warned of severe consequences if no ceasefire emerged, pivoted quickly afterwards. Writing on social media, he argued that the best way to end the war was not a ceasefire, which oftentimes do not hold up, but a full peace agreement. Speaking later to Fox News, he claimed he and Putin had largely agreed on outlines involving land and security guarantees, but acknowledged that Ukraine has to agree to it. European leaders, briefed after Trump's calls, expressed mixed reactions, part relief that no land concessions had been struck in Anchorage, part alarm that Washington might now pressure Kyiv into a deal. French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly warned that Putin could not be trusted, citing Russia's record of breaking the Minsk agreements.
Putin plays a long game and will not respect promises. Trump is in a rush to make a deal, but Putin is much less so.
Several capitals moved quickly to coordinate a response. A joint signaling effort reaffirmed ironclad security guarantees for Ukraine, rejected territorial changes imposed by force, and underscored that only Kyiv could decide on its land. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer welcomed US efforts toward peace, but pledged tighter sanctions until Putin stops his barbaric assault. On the ground, meanwhile, the fighting continued. Russian forces pressed incremental gains in the east, while both sides carried out overnight strikes, illustrating why timing, leverage, and sequencing are now the central questions in the fragile diplomacy that has emerged from Alaska. Meanwhile, a Reuters report said Trump urged Ukraine to strike a deal with Moscow, arguing that
Russia is a very big power, and they're not.
Quoting a source familiar with a briefing between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Reuters reported that the US president relayed that Vladimir Putin had offered to freeze most front lines if Kyiv surrendered all of Donetsk, a key industrial region coveted by Moscow. Zelenskyy rejected the proposal, the source noted. Russia already holds around 20% of Ukraine's territory, including nearly 3/4 of Donetsk, parts of which it first occupied in 2014. Zelenskyy, however, confirmed he would meet Trump in Washington on August 18th. European allies, while welcoming Trump's diplomatic push, reiterated their backing for Kyiv and pledged tighter sanctions on Moscow. The source added that European leaders had been invited to join the talks. In an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, Trump suggested he and Putin had touched on land concessions and security guarantees for Ukraine and had largely agreed.
I think we're pretty close to a deal. Ukraine has to agree to it. Maybe they'll say no. Gotta make a deal.
For his part, Zelensky has repeatedly said he cannot cede territory without constitutional change. He has also stressed the need for binding security guarantees to prevent renewed aggression, telling reporters that he and Trump discussed positive signals from the American side on participation. Ukraine, he said, requires a durable peace, not just another pause before the next Russian invasion. From Moscow's perspective, Anchorage was a success. The summit broke what it calls Russia's isolation, bought time, and nudged Washington toward its preferred pathway.
I would like to note right away that the visit was timely and very useful. We talked about almost all areas of our cooperation, but first of all, of course, we talked about the possible settlement of the Ukrainian crisis on a fair basis. And of course, we had the opportunity, which we did, to talk about the genesis causes of this crisis. And it is the elimination of these root causes that should be the basis for a settlement.
For skeptics in the West, however, the summit delivered optics, but no obligations. For Kyiv, the path ahead remains fraught. Engage in talks to shape the outcome while refusing to legitimize Russia's occupation. Above all, Ukraine seeks NATO-grade guarantees to ensure that any agreement is enforceable, not another Minsk-style accord destined to collapse. The coming days will test these fault lines. Zelensky is set to meet Trump in Washington on Monday, where the Ukrainian leader will attempt to convince the US president that sustained Western support serves broader security interests. Trump, in turn, appears focused on pushing Kyiv toward concessions to make a deal. Whether a trilateral meeting involving Putin, Zelensky and Trump ever materializes remains unclear. Moscow denies it was discussed in Alaska.